Hey guys. Oh, sorry for not being on for a while. I'm super excited. I've been working on a huge project and a significant project that I look forward to sharing with you, hopefully either by the end of this year or early next year. And we'll just see how things go. But I felt like it was time to just put my nose to the grindstone and get it done. And now I'm in like the stage where I'm refining everything and all of that. So I'm super, super excited about what is coming. And so anyway, I felt like that was more important that I finish that and take a little bit of a break from our lives, but I have that completed for the time being, and let's get back to our study. So we studied the last time on overcoming disappointment. We studied how it's important to know your trials because you need to know, is it demonic, is it man-made? And is it something that maybe God is teaching you? Not that the trial or anything, like death or lack or anything like that is the trial itself, or those are lessons to be learned because he teaches us through the word. But we do face challenges that require us to navigate well through them, because by going through the process, we will then be able to learn a lot of things to help other people. We will learn a lot of things about ourselves, etc. So we'll get into that type of trial as the last one. Tonight, I want to go into man-made trials. My goodness, I thing after thing after thing come through. Okay, so man-made trials, I want you to keep in mind that they can be demonically inspired as well. And that's clearly evident in the examples of the enemy's influence on the Pharisees, the enemy's influence on Judas Iscariot. The enemy takes advantage of, and I don't know why we have a slow connection. Hopefully you guys are good as far as being able to hear this. But he takes advantage of heart conditions and motives, and he manipulates them, and especially people that are willing or that are blind to carry out his purposes. And so this is important because we don't want to excuse the individual but by blaming the enemy, but at the same time we can recognize his influence on the heart condition. Pharaoh is actually a really good one. So are the Pharisees. If you read the situation with Pharaoh in the plagues, and then the situation with the Pharisees, their hearts were already hardened. And so the original language gives the idea that God used the hardness of heart in order to perpetuate his plan, which was to make himself known after he freed Israel from slavery. And he knew that Pharaoh was not going to bend. But the fault lies with Pharaoh because his heart was hard and he refused to listen. In fact, the plagues could have ended way before they did. So here we have in John 8, we're going to read in the Passion Translation. It says, Jesus walked up the Mount of Olives near the city where he spent the night. Then at dawn, Jesus appeared in the temple courts again, and soon all the people gathered round to listen to his words. So he sat down and taught them. Then in the middle of his teaching, the religious scholars and the Pharisees broke through the crowd and brought a woman who had been caught in the act of committing adultery and made her stand in the middle of everyone. Then they said to Jesus, "Teacher, we caught this woman in the very act of adultery. Doesn't Moses' law command us to stone to death a woman like this? Tell us, what do you say we should do with her?" They were only testing Jesus because they hoped to trap him with his own words and accuse him of breaking the laws of Moses. Now, I love how Jesus handled this situation, but first I want to point out this is a man-made trial. So often in man-made trials, people are used in them as pawns, okay? And this woman, I mean, back in that day, it was really hard to prove adultery because the couple that were committing adultery had to be caught in the act. And stoning them to death was very rare. Typically, the person would just divorce them, which was a choice that the husband could make. And so the fact that they caught this woman in the act of adultery means that they probably set her up, or they followed her until they saw her and the other person committing the act of adultery. The other thing that's interesting is they did not bring the man. The man, now, if he committed adultery by sleeping with another man's wife, he too could be stoned to death. And you weren't supposed to have sex before marriage in the Old Testament, just like in the New Testament. However, a man could have multiple wives. So men back then got away with a little bit more when it came to marriage matters. But in this instance, I just find it interesting that the man is not brought with the female, okay? And so Jesus, he doesn't say a word. Instead, he bends down and he writes in the dust with his finger, okay? Now, the law is clear, and Jesus, I believe, was doing two things because he lived 100% as a man. The first thing I believe is he was fulfilling scripture, which I'm going to read the scripture to you. The second thing is I think he might have been buying some time to come to a response that would solve the problem of not breaking the law, but also solve the problem of saving the woman, right? So he's caught between a rock and a hard place because they hoped to accuse him using his own words to break the law of Moses. So if Jesus would have just said, you know, this is ridiculous, you guys probably followed her over there, blah, 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 he would have actually broken the law because Moses' law was very clear. And we also know that he came to fulfill the law, and so that would have ended his purpose. I mean, there was a lot at stake here. So he needed wisdom. So he bends down and he's right on the ground, I believe, to buy time. However, some have suggested that he was fulfilling Jeremiah 17:13, which I definitely think this could be the case, and that he was recording the names of her accusers for future judgment. But in Jeremiah 17:13, it says, "O Lord, the hope of Israel, all who forsake you shall be ashamed. Those who depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters." So again, the principle of him hearing Holy Spirit is solid, and also the possibility of him writing their names for judgment. But what I wanted to pick out for our purposes, because we're probably not going to be writing in the dust the names of people that need to be judged, is what we need to do when we're facing such dicey situations. We do not need to react. Instead, we need to pause, listen, and respond. Because wisdom is the key of getting out of man-made trials, okay? So pause, listen, respond. Use wisdom to get out of these types of trials. Okay, so let's look at verse 7. Oh, I forgot to read the rest of verse 6, where it says, "But Jesus didn't answer them. Instead, he simply bent down and wrote in the dust with his finger." Angry, they kept insisting that he answer their question. So Jesus stood up and looked at them and said, "Let's have the man who has never had a sinful desire throw the first stone at her." Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So good, so good. And then he bent over again and he wrote some more words in the dust. Upon hearing that, her accusers slowly left the crowd one at a time, beginning with the oldest to the youngest with a convicted conscience, until finally Jesus was left alone with a woman standing still there in the front of him. He stood back up and said to her, "Dear woman, where are your accusers? Is there no one here to condemn you?" Looking around, and she said, "I see no one, Lord." And he said, "Then I certainly don't condemn you either. Go and from now on, be free from a life of sin. Let me look down here real quick. Okay, so in verse 7, where it says, where Jesus said, let's have the man who has never had a sinful desire throw the first stone at her. That's interesting. The Greek word that is used here is not the word that refers to just sin. It actually is best translated as sinful desire, because desire is the source of all motivation. And so he's like, okay, anybody here, have you not ever had a sinful desire? Go ahead and chunk that first stone, right? And I like that he brought it into the heart condition, because people that are religious, and I mean that like religious in a negative way, where it's all about do's and don'ts and laws and performance and all of those things, they always externalize. And that means that their righteousness, or their feeling that they're righteous, is based on what they're doing instead of their heart condition. And so Jesus always took it internal. And the reason he took it internal is your internal world is always reflected externally. So if your internal world is good, then your external world will be good. This is also the 3 John verse 2, where it says, may you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. That could be translated to the same degree that your soul prospers. Now, this is amazing. The first thing is, the woman addressed him as Lord, which is Maria in the Aramaic. It means Lord Yahweh, right? Like she called him Yahweh. Now, see, this is what I find interesting. The religious did not recognize him as God in the flesh. A woman just caught in the act of adultery recognized God in the flesh. Bam, right? Mic drop. So that's interesting. She had a revelation of who he was at the moment of her rescue. Second, where he says, then I certainly don't condemn you either. Then I certainly is an emphatic use, pronoun, meaning that he put the emphasis on the I. I, as Yahweh, right? Oh, good grief. These, can y'all see those? It's ridiculous. I do not condemn you either, which leads us to the third tidbit, and that is this. The Mosaic law required 2 witnesses. None were left. Therefore, she was freed legally, and then Jesus could free her because her accusers were gone and not break the Mosaic law. You know what I'm saying? See, the reason I like this is because it is strategic, and I love strategy. It's just brilliant. You know what I mean? It's like he goes to the desire, and they're like, well, you know, I've had that desire. And so they all take off, and he legally frees her because she no longer has her accusers. And then at the same time, she recognizes him as God in the flesh. I mean, it's just an awesome story. Okay? So I have in my notes, wow, just wow. So let me give you some other man-made tests. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Other examples are the question about paying taxes to Caesar. So that's in Matthew 22:15 through 22, Mark 12:13 through 17, and then Luke 20:20 through 26. And so they were hoping to trap him between supporting the Roman law, which would make him distasteful to his followers, or advocating rebellion, which would give them a legal means to get him arrested by the Romans. And so he basically was like, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. He was then questioned about the greatest commandment. And this is in Matthew 22:34-40 and 12:28 through 34. I mean, it's amazing. They just keep after him in these chapters. So a lawyer among the Pharisees asked Jesus which commandment was the greatest, attempting to test his knowledge of the law. And so then he said, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. They then try to trap him on the question about divorce, which I'm super excited about. Some things I've learned that I will be teaching in the future on this. But in Matthew 19:3-9 and Mark 10:2-12, They asked if it was lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason, or this is the any cause divorce that the Rabbi Hillel had taught. So basically, you know, if the wife burned your food, you could divorce her as easy as sending her out of the house. Or if she got too old and wasn't as pretty, you could get rid of her. And, you know, they're basically like trying to get him to say that he doesn't support any cause divorce, and then he would lose popularity with the people. And so Jesus basically discussed original intention for marriage and the hardness of human hearts. They then questioned him about authority, and this is in Matthew 21, 23 through 27, Mark 11, 27 through 33, and then Luke 21 through 8. So they questioned his authority to teach and also to heal and to perform miracles because they wanted to catch him in some type of blasphemous claim. He countered that by asking about John the Baptist's authority, which they could not answer without incriminating themselves, because if they said that he was a prophet, then they would be guilty for not obeying the prophet. If they said he wasn't a prophet, then the people would have rebelled. Okay? So Jesus caught them in their own trap and got them confused, which I love because, again, it's strategic. They also questioned him about fasting. So this is in Matthew 9, 14 through 17, Mark 2, 18 through 22, and then Luke 5, 33 through 39. And so they were like, well, why don't you fast like John's disciples did? Or why don't you fast like we do? And so Jesus gave them a parable, which are very convenient. I've actually had situations where I spoke in parables and I'm like, what is happening here? And usually I found that is used with people that are just in such unbelief that no matter what you say, they're not going to believe. So the message is hidden. And then the final man-made trap was his healing on the Sabbath. So that's in Matthew 12, 9 through 14, Mark 3, 1 through 6, and Luke 6, 6 through 11. Now, I know I'm going through these fast. Here's a little trick. If you write down the numbers first, you'll remember it better because the book is easier to remember. Just a little thing I learned from Ray Hughes. So they watched to see if Jesus would heal a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath, because they were hoping to get him in breaking the Sabbath law. So he did heal the man, and he also proved that healing on the Sabbath was lawful, and he actually got pretty ticked off about their ridiculousness. So now I want to read several scriptures on the role of wisdom in trials, because again, wisdom is how you get out of man-made trials. And wisdom is from God. You can ask him for it. It also comes from reading the word, especially the book of Proverbs. I read it every single day, every single morning, because I just didn't have a lot of it. You know, let's just be real. I did not have a lot of it for a long time. And I decided, you know what? I'm tired of not having wisdom, so I'm just going to read about it. I'm going to read about it every day, and I'm going to execute wisdom, okay? So I love the Passion Translation when it comes to reading the book of Proverbs. Actually, just anything. I can't wait till the whole thing's done, the whole Bible in the Passion Translation. But it really, number one, shows God's heart. Number two, it's easy to understand, but it's based on the Aramaic and the Greek, which I love. So in Proverbs 2, 6 through 9, it says, wisdom is a gift from a generous God, and every word he speaks is full of revelation and becomes a fountain of understanding within you. For the Lord has a hidden storehouse of wisdom made accessible to his godly lovers. He becomes your personal bodyguard as you follow his ways, protecting and guarding you as you choose what is right. Then you will discover all that is just, proper, and fair, and be empowered to make the right decisions as you walk into your destiny. But I love where it says he becomes your personal bodyguard as you follow his ways, protecting and guarding you as you choose what is right. So we saw that a lot with Jesus. Then we have Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. It says, trust in the Lord completely and do not rely on your own opinions. With all your heart, rely on him to guide you, and he will lead you in every decision you make. Become intimate with him in whatever you do, and he will lead you wherever you go. Don't think for a moment you know it all. So now we've got leading to, different locations. He'll tell you what to say. Then in the same chapter, verses 21 through 23, wisdom is our hiding place. It says, my child, never drift off course from these 2 goals for your life. Okay? 2 goals. Okay. Do y'all see the balloons? This is, okay, if y'all don't see the balloons, every time I do this, there's balloons. I wonder what happens if I do 2. Oh, we get confetti. Okay. My child, never drift off course from these 2 goals. To walk in wisdom and to discover discernment. I would write that down. 2 goals in life. Walk in wisdom, discover discernment. Don't ever forget how they empower you, for they strengthen you inside and out and inspire you to do what's right. You'll be energized and refreshed by the healing they bring. They give you living hope to guide you, and not one of life's tests will cause you to stumble. Bam, right? So good, so good. So walk in wisdom, discover discernment, and then they guide you, and not one of life's tests will cause you to stumble. And then Proverbs 4:5 through 6. So make wisdom your quest. Search for the revelation of life's meaning. Don't let what I say go one ear and out the other. Stick with wisdom, and she will stick with you, protecting you throughout your days. She will rescue all who passionately listen to her voice. So now we've got rescuing, we've got protection, but we need to passionately listen to wisdom's voice. And then listen to this. For I am wisdom, I am shrewd and intelligent. I have at my disposal living understanding to devise a plan for your life. Oh, it's one of my favorites. Let me just give that to you, you guys again. Proverbs 4:5 through 6. Then we have 8:14. You will find true success when you find me, for I have insight into wise plans that are designed just for you, and I hold in my hands living understanding, courage, and strength. They're all ready and waiting for you. Proverbs 11:2 through 3. When you act with presumption, convinced that you're right, don't be surprised if you fall flat on your face. But walking in humility helps you make wise decisions. Integrity will lead you to success and happiness, but treachery will destroy your dreams. And then Proverbs 12:18 through 21. Reckless words are like the thrust of a sword, cutting remarks meant to stab and to hurt. But the words of the wise soothe and heal. Truthful words will stand the test of time, but one day every lie will be seen for what it is. Deception fills the heart of those who plot harm, but those who plan for peace are filled with joy. Calamity is not allowed to overwhelm the righteous, but there's nothing but trouble waiting for the wicked. And then Proverbs 15:24, the life path of the prudent lifts them progressively heavenward, delivering them from the death spiral that keeps tugging them downward. I mean, these are powerful, powerful verses. Like if you just read these, your life can change. And then Proverbs 24:3 through 4 is the last one. It says, wise people are builders. They build families, businesses, communities, and through intelligence and insight, their enterprises are established and endure. Because of their skilled leadership, the hearts of people are filled with the treasures of wisdom and the pleasures of spiritual wealth. I mean, this is just so good, right? Wise people are builders. So if you have people in your life that are not building, then that's not wisdom, right? So we should be building families, businesses, communities through intelligence and insight. So here's something that's key to remember. If you tend to react versus respond, you will fail man-made and demonically inspired tests every time. Every time. So we want to respond, not react. The enemy knows what your triggers are, and people know what your triggers are. And so in order to avoid reacting and falling for the trap, recognize your triggers. Recognize those past experiences that your brain might think, oh, this is familiar, and then it reacts versus responding. This is very, very important. And especially if you've been wounded by past church people or parents or anything, and learn your identity. Because the work of salvation is a renewing of the soul, which is the mind, the will, and the emotions. So in John 13:3 in the New King James, it says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God. So Jesus knew he was sourced in God. He knew he was returning in God. His identity was sure. Therefore, he was able to correctly hear Holy Spirit and avoid getting into his ego, which is always centered around loss. Loss of reputation, loss of provision, loss of a relationship. And so fear of loss is always ego-based thinking, and that's why a lot of people will react versus respond. Well, he didn't fear loss. And the reason Jesus did not fear loss is he knew who he was, okay? And who God was to him. He knew his assignment. He only feared God, and all of these protected him from falling into man's traps, or men's traps, not man's, because that would be an incorrect grammar situation. Okay, so might I just once more point out that the adulterous woman called Jesus Yahweh? So good, so good, just so good. And the fact that he was able to fulfill his mission and to fulfill the law of Moses by eliminating her witnesses, which would have condemned her, is the most brilliant strategy I've ever seen. Well, I didn't see it, personally, because I obviously wasn't there. Anyway, that is it for tonight. And over on the Hub Apostolic Training page, which all of you guys can find on Facebook, I am going to talk about one of the greatest fears and how that may be tied to your call. So I'm going to hop off here, and I'm going to go over and do a very short instruction on that topic. So have a great week, and I will hopefully see y'all next week.